It was a day like any other in the countryside of Traction. The day was sunny, the air was pure, the grass and trees were green and lush, and there was no sound of disturbance. The community was called Traction because in times past, many were attracted to this peaceful haven. Nowadays, the younger generation have started to leave Traction for the lure of big city living. This became most notable to the point where people started to call the community Subtraction. Jimmy preferred the name Subtraction just for the fun of it. He lived with his parents John and Sarah, his older sister Lexi, and his grandmother Ivy. Jimmy was a positive person. He looked at life with a plus sign. The only thing that caused him great displeasure was school. Well, not everything at school. Jimmy loved recess and hanging with his friends. He, however, had a hard time in the classroom. The only subject he loved was art and craft. He had a knack for it. He could spend the entire day learning about shadows and brushstrokes, angles, colors, and hues. This was his haven. Jimmy excelled at art. He has already decided what he wants to do when he gets older, so he does just enough to pass the other subjects. Just enough. Jimmy would have been on his way to a successful year if it wasn't for one subject, mathematics. So far this year, Jimmy has been at the bottom of his class. He hated mathematics. He just could not see the importance of it or how learning it would have any impact on his life. Jimmy was on his way to the park on his bicycle when he ran into his math teacher. The very sight of him made Jimmy's stomach churn. "Good day, Jimmy," Mr. Turner shouted. "Nice day for a ride, don't you think? I hope you make some time to study for your upcoming math test." Jimmy took a deep breath and sighed. Mr. Turner said in his most encouraging tone, "You can do well, Jimmy, if you study and practice your math." Jimmy retorted, "But that's easy for you, Mr. Turner. You teach math for a living. That's about the only use of math, just a subject to learn in school." Mr. Turner said, "I don't know about that, Jimmy. If you pay close attention, I'm sure you'll realize that you do math every day. If you ask me, I'd say math is the most important subject you can learn in school." Jimmy laughed to himself and thought Mr. Turner had clearly inhaled too much chalk dust. Mr. Turner realized that Jimmy was not convinced, so he did something unexpected. He said to Jimmy, "If you can tell me 10 instances in which you use math in daily activities, I will only set multiple choice questions on the math test. The only condition is that you must not share this deal with anyone." Mr. Turner was not a fan of multiple choice questions. He preferred to see how his students arrive at their answers. A sense of hopeful anticipation overwhelmed Jimmy. He thought to himself, "I hate math, I'm bad at it, but at least I could guess my way to a passing grade." "Challenge accepted," Jimmy said to Mr. Turner. He walked away with a grin on his face as he contemplated that he might have a shot at passing his upcoming math test. He just needed to figure out 10 instances in which he used math in real life. He was still deep in thought when his pal Jackson pulled up and asked him if he wanted to race. Jimmy was never one to back down from a challenge, so he started to count down from 3. 3, 2, 1, ha! Jimmy exclaimed, frightening Jackson. "What was that for?" Jackson said with a hint of anger. Remembering the condition of his deal with Mr. Turner, Jimmy pointed to Andrew, who had just burst the corner. "Andrew is coming to join us. Let's wait for him," Jimmy said, still excited that he figured out that he used math to count down when starting a race. "Now there's 3 of us," Jimmy said, realizing that he just counted himself and his two friends, another way in which he used math in daily life. For the rest of his time at the park, Jimmy counted and counted, feeling quite satisfied that he has found the 10 instances in which he used math. He was ready for Mr. Turner. When Jimmy returned home that afternoon, the house was filled with the most pleasant aromas. Grandma Ivy was baking. She heard the door slam and shouted, "Is that you, Jimmy?" "It's me, Gran," he responded as he hurried to the kitchen. "Gran, you are the best. Pizza and cookies, sweet, my favorites," Jimmy said as he stretched out his hand to take a cookie. "Not so fast, Jimmy," Gran said. "I am having guests over. 3 of my friends are visiting." "What? So I cannot get any?" Jimmy asked. "Of course, there's plenty to go around, but we need to share my guest's portion first and set it aside," Gran responded. "How many cookies should each person get?" Jimmy asked. "I would say 3, Gran answered. She continued, "Also, pour half of the jug of juice in that fancy glass jar and then fill the rest of it with ice and put it in the refrigerator. I will take care of everything else." "Gran," Jimmy responded sheepishly, "I don't mind helping you." He wanted to make sure he secured enough food for himself. After helping Gran with her get-together, Jimmy thought of Dad and Mom and wondered why they were taking so long to return from the airport with his sister Lexi. He and Dad had plans to watch the British Premier League. It was a deciding game as to which team will be crowned champions, and it was between the 2 top teams, Manchester City versus Liverpool FC. The match was set to kick off at 7 p.m. local time, and it was just 30 minutes before the match started. Just as he was thinking, his dad called. "Jimmy, the road is awful. A truck turned over, so the traffic is jammed. I may not be there before another 2 hours." Jimmy exclaimed, "Crunches! You will only catch about 15 minutes of open play." Dad responded, "I will listen to the match on the radio until I get home, son. Hopefully the road clears faster than I am expecting." Jimmy was disappointed that his dad would not be home in time to watch the match with him, but he still enjoyed the game. By the time Dad got home, the match had already been decided as Manchester City was up 3-0. There was no comeback for Liverpool. The weekend went by so quickly, and soon Jimmy was heading off to school on Monday morning. The day was dragging along as per usual, but Jimmy had a unique feeling that followed him all day. It was the first time that Jimmy was excited to see Mr. Turner. Jimmy likes doing challenges, and he was so sure he had this one in the bag. Jimmy spent the class trying to make eye contact with Mr. Turner, but he did not once look his way. For him, it was another day teaching a class full of students who were on either end of the math spectrum. The handful who loved math and dominated the class versus the rest who were disinterested. Jimmy was usually comfortable with his position in the back row. This time though, he wanted to be seen. He wasn't in the mood to be scoffed at by the math geniuses, so he refrained from participating in the lesson. When the bell rang, he lingered in his seat and then slowly made his way to Mr. Turner. "Do you remember our deal, sir?" Jimmy asked. "How could I forget, Mr. Barkley? So what did you come up with?" Mr. Turner responded. He patiently waited while Jimmy confidently listed 10 instances when he counted something. It was Mr. Turner's turn to speak. He said, "Very good, Jimmy. I am happy that you recognize that you do use math in everyday life. But you only gave me 1 instance with 10 different examples. What about the other 9? Jimmy was completely lost and confused. How could Mr. Turner say that he only gave him 1 instance? Jimmy thought. but he knew it was pointless to argue with him. After all, it was Mr. Turner who set the terms. In a dejected tone, Jimmy said, "I just don't get math. I don't see it, I don't hear it, I don't feel it. It's too hard to understand, and it doesn't make any sense to me, Mr. Turner." Jimmy's familiar words pierced Mr. Turner, and he could tell by them that Jimmy was on the verge of giving up. Decades-old memories flooded his mind as he reflected on a lad who only learned math in his final year of high school. Jimmy was walking away when Mr. Turner stopped him. "I have a proposal,"